Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're back in War Thunder and it's time to continue with the past to the developer stuff. After having a look at the aviation stuff and also the ground forces stuff, it's now time to talk about the naval forces and also the helicopters. Now, the reason why it takes me quite a while to get these videos out, at least at the moment, is there's a ton of reading to do on a lot of these machines, especially the Cleveland class, and I'm trying to condense it down as much as possible. So if an individual wants to go read about it more, see this as kind of like a tidbit, and then you can take it and run with it. So that's basically the way I'm seeing it, because I'm going to show you an example. So Rogue Starflyer here has done an amazing job at sorting out the Cleveland class light cruiser. If you don't know what the Cleveland class light cruiser is, it's one of the most popular and and the most produced light cruiser that the Americans ever made. The thing about that, though, because it is so popular and so well known and also so numerous, there is a ton of reading about it, as you can see. And what I do with these videos is I don't just read the past to developers, I also read all of the sources, which are alongside of them. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff to get through, which is why sometimes if I do actually have to work or if I have other stuff to do, it takes me a while to go through it. So anyway, let's talk about the Cleveland class light cruiser. The light cruiser, the Cleveland class, it's a set of ships which were a development on top of the Brooklyn class destroyer. The Brooklyn light cruiser that we have in game. The main thing they were trying to focus on was increasing its cruising range, the anti-aircraft armament, and also giving it more protection generally around the belt compared to other machines. Now, as per usual with a lot of these light cruisers, there was obviously the Washington Naval Arms Treaty in 1921, where they worked out, what they want to create and how they want to create them, trying to limit what you could put on machines, just so either they didn't become insanely large or not really to make warfare fair, but more about just trying to agree on terms of warfare. See it as kind of a new age well, not really the Geneva Convention, but kind of just a set of rules of warfare that you would go along with. So after that, of course, they created the Cleveland class light cruiser. They built an absolute ton of them, as you can see here. Here are all of the list of them. I believe those are around 20 overall, and the Cleveland itself, the CL-55, was able to get 13 battle stars in World War II. They were used, as you can see, also in Vietnam, and the main things to look for when it comes to the USS Cleveland, which is of course the first of the class of 27, 27 10,000-ton light cruisers. It was built in Camden, but the main thing is that it was used all over World War II, whether it was in Guadalcanal, it was used mainly in the South Pacific War Zone, but it also was used in other areas such as the North Africa invasion. So these ships, especially the head ship, the Cleveland, it just kind of went everywhere. It was used all over the place, and you can understand why a lot of people have, a bond to a machine like this because of the fact there were so many of them made, because it had such a prominent role in World War II and also later wars. So let's have a look at its armament and everything else. The first thing to understand is it's very similar to a few of the machines we have in game. It has 4 6.6 inches, so 4 sets, 2 on the front, 2 on the back, here and here, as you can see. So the configuration you normally see. Then, of course, it has the 6 dual 5 inches as secondaries, 4 dual 40mm, and 13 single 20mm. So it's got a good set of anti-aircraft, a good set of secondaries in the form of 12 5 inches, and then, of course, the 12 primaries. So this thing would pack a hell of a punch. As I said before, think about the Brooklyn being the predecessor to this ship, and we all know how good the Brooklyn is in game, therefore why not have another machine which is similar to it, but slightly better. Another thing as well is the armor. The belt itself is 89 to 127 millimeters, and the turrets are 38 to 152. So you can see that it's still got decent armor. I don't think that really puts it away from anything else, but it definitely means that it will be able to stop a lot of HE from destroyers if it ever, gets into it. There's no mention of torpedoes here, which doesn't really surprise me. Normally when you get to this size of ship, at least for the Americans, the torpedoes were dropped in favor of other things. So therefore, I can definitely see this being added to the game, especially now that we're going into heavy cruisers, or at least we seem to be with the Japanese. The Cleveland makes the most sense for a machine to be added to the game for the Americans if we're just looking on popularity and use in World War II and beyond. The next ship we are looking at is the K4 Lorle. Now, this is from Rays, and the Lorle is actually a Belgium ship, or at least a Belgium design, and it was supposed to protect fisheries, or, protect fishing around Belgium. Now, what happened was, of course, in 1940, the Germans invaded Belgium. The Belgium people kind of just, no, that's not right to say. Let's just say surrendered, and so I can be politically neutral on it. But yeah, the Belgians surrendered, the Germans took over, and therefore they captured a lot of the resources which the Belgians had, including ships like this. Now, they actually did some slight modifications to this machine, and they were actually involved mainly in either laying mines or defending machines which were around the place. The idea was that you would have a bunch of mine layers, or you would have a bunch of machines which were designed to get rid of mines, and the Lorle would be used to try and defend them if they were being attacked. And there was an instance where the K4 actually came up against some MBT British torpedo boats. There were 7 of them, and it was able to get a direct hit on one of the MBTs, making it explode instantly, while it was with some mine searcher M104s. So yeah, it did actually see a little bit of combat, not a ton it seems, but overall it was used. It had 3 105mm on it, 4 37mm, 10 20mm, and of course a mine thrower. So this is heavily armed when it comes to its AA. The primary armaments of 3 105s, and also the secondaries when it comes to the 37s would be nice to see. Unfortunately, you can't really get an idea of where most of the guns would be in this picture, apart from the 105s. You can see there will be 2 on the back and 1 on the front, and then I'm guessing the other ones just kind of splotted around the center, which is normally what happens. So I could definitely see this as a mid-tier machine. I hope it wouldn't be a premium. I would hope it would just be, how it is, just in the German tree. But we'll see. I mean, since it is a captured vehicle, I suppose it is in that area for ship premiums. So we'll have to see. I think it should be added to the game, though. It seems to fit. The next one is a riverboat, I suppose, if you want to call it a riverboat. This is by Jan Gustil War Thunder, and this is the Project 1208 and also the Project 1248. You know how we have machines in the in War Thunder when it comes to Soviets, which have T-34 turrets on them, and also PT-76 turrets. Well, welcome to a machine which has T-55 turrets on it. It seems like they took the idea of World War II and even post-World War II and just kept running with it, either for efficiency reasons or just from really liking the turrets, who knows. I've never really looked fully into why they decided to go down this route, and nobody else did. But yeah, as you can see, they have T-55 turrets on them, and as they were more modernized going forward, they had a lot of other weapon systems as well. You can see that there was a set of 4 Strela 2 SAM system launchers, which were able to fire the 9M32 missiles, to 2 100mm D10 T2s, which is of course the T-55 turrets. Then you've got two, well, it's 6. Is this the wrong way around? It might be the right way around or the wrong way around, but I'm guessing it's saying 6 dual sets of 30mm AK-630s, because if it was 2 sets of 6, I mean, it could be two sets of 6 or 1 set of 6. I'm just reading it wrong. That would actually make a bit more sense. But if we look up here, these don't look like, 6 barrels. It looks more like 2. Then, of course, you have the 12-7s, the 7.62s, some grenade launchers, and, of course, a rocket launcher as well, if you feel like it, and the Aquilon Combat Laser Weapons Complex. So this thing had a little bit of everything, and the fact that it has the SAM system launchers and the missiles would mean that it would have to be a little bit of a higher BR, but the thing is you could add it in without them. Technically we have ships in game which are supposed to have anti-ship missiles on it. One of these squadron vehicles, and by the way, the squadron vehicles were available for a little bit this morning, which was kind of odd, but then they quickly took them down, so I'm guessing that somebody either flicked it by accident or the testing stuff, who knows. But the main thing is the Soviet squadron vehicle which is there, the boat could actually carry anti-ship missiles, and also the one after it as well. The 159's, I suppose, son, or son's son, in that sense, could also carry them. So we may be seeing in future machines like this having anti-ship missiles, or at least surface-to-air missiles, which would be a lot of fun. So yeah, don't just see this as it's another machine with the T-55 or the tank turrets on it. It's got a lot of other stuff going on as well. The HMS Belfast. So this machine is by Collusion IA, who's of course the wonderful game master, who is the head mod for Fly Daily as well. Lovely guy, very nice to talk to, and I wish him well in his endeavours when it comes to, I believe he's going to join the New Zealand Army or something like that, and it's wonderful to see that people are finding stuff to do, I suppose is the best way to put it. But anyway, this is the HMS Belfast. We already have a town class light cruiser in game in the form of the Southampton. The Belfast is very similar to it. It was launched on St. Patrick's Day in 1938, so this is a World War II vehicle. And as you can see, there's not really much different between it and the Southampton. Let's see, when was this actually put in? 2018, so this was before the Southampton came to game. So I feel like if the fact that this gets, passed on is a little bit odd, but it's still nice to see. But the question is, why not just have all of the town class ships passed on instead of just, this one? But anyway, it has access to 12 6-inch guns in sets of triples. Then it has, of course, 12 4-inches set in duels, and of course 16 2-pounders in the forms of 2x8s, so 2 8-barrel mountings. Even though this is a 4-barrel mounting, just swip it and you get 2. And also 8 5-inch 13mm 2x4s, and it also has some torpedo tubes. So overall, once again, it would be really fun to get a machine like this in game. We already have one though, in the form of the Southampton, and it was kind of odd when they added stuff like the Brooklyn, because I thought they'd add the Southampton in, or something similar to it at the same time, but they never did. It's nice to see it in game now, though. The only question is, do you go for the post-World War II modification, or do you go for the World War II modification, which doesn't have all the bells and whistles? I think you go for the World War II modification, at least in the form of what we have now. It would be a nice addition, even though we already have a town class in the game. The next one is, of course, from the Japanese. It's the Shimakaze-class destroyer, and this is from Azens. Now, the Shimakaze is seen as one of the best destroyers that Japan produced, and the issue that it had was that it was too costly. So it was one of these machines which was incredibly good at what it did, but they were not able to produce it in high numbers, and therefore they focused building on other things, such as the Akiduki-class, which is one of the best words I think I've ever said, and also the Matsu-class. Like, Akiduki is just it rolls off the tongue in such a beautiful way. But yeah, this is a Class 1 destroyer, and also when it comes to the Shimakaze, it had some interesting stuff on it. So first of all, it was able to go 40 knots, but remember, this isn't an overload test, so they're basically pushing it to its limits. It had access to 15 torpedo tubes in sets of in sets of 5. So you had 3 sets of 5 torpedo tubes. You can see them sat here, 1, 2, and 3 on the design, and also the guns. The guns are 3 sets, I believe, if I'm reading this correctly. Here we go. Yes, you have 3 sets of twin turrets of the 127mm, so the one that we have in game, or at least similar to it. Then you have 2 sets of dual 25mm, 1 set of dual 13.2mm. So it's a fast machine. It has a lot of torpedoes on it, as you can see here, and here, but it doesn't have a lot of secondary armaments. It only has a couple of 25s and a couple of 13s. So even though it's got some really nice main guns and also access to all the torpedoes, once a plane turns up, you're really going to be struggling. But does that mean it shouldn't be added? Of course not. It should be added to the game alongside everything else that was built, tested, and all of that wonderful stuff. So the Shimakaze would be wonderful to see. The next one is a helicopter, because we're doing the naval and the helicopter stuff together. This is the Sikorsky MH60 Nighthawk. It's from Kev2Go, and this is an American naval helicopter. And after reading into it, it has a really cool story behind it, but the best way to talk about it from a gameplay point of view is it's just a helicopter which has all the bells and whistles of everything else, but also it actually has the ability to carry torpedoes. So it can carry 3 Mark 46 or Mark 54 torpedoes, which is something we haven't seen in game yet. The fact, a helicopter carrying torpedoes. It also has access to Hellfire missiles because, well, it's a modern American helicopter, so they all have access to Hellfire missiles. So you can see in sets of 4, so 8 in total. Then it has the APKWS-2, which is the 2 laser-guided 2.75 rocket pods, and then it has some Penguin missiles, which, if you don't know what they are massive anti-ship missiles, but here he said can be excluded for balance reasons. I mean, sure, but we're going to get it someday. Then, of course, M60 machine guns or M240s, and of course a 30mm cannon in the center. So yeah, it's another one of these American helicopters, which is going to be very close to the H-1Z, which is going to be really useful. I mean, do we really need it? No. Will we probably get it? Yes, because a lot of people are interested in these helicopters. But my like when we talk about this and also stuff like the Apache, my answer always is, well, you already have the H-1Z. Like, why would you want them? Oh, they're iconic? Okay, cool. Would they be more combat effective? I mean, we can argue the point either way, but overall no is the answer. So yeah, it's one of those things. Maybe we'll get it, maybe we won't. I would prefer they focus on other things. The KA-50 by Milo Cat. If you don't know what the KA-50 is, it's the Black Shark, which is a Soviet aircraft. And once kind of the Soviet Union fell, in the 1990s, the project didn't really disappear. They still built a lot of them, and it became much more of a supportive helicopter in modern day Russia. But when it was conceived, this was seen as an out-and-out air dominance helicopter. So if there was anything else around, it would get annihilated. And this is kind of a concept which pretty much died very early on in its development. So think about it like this, right? So you've got the Ka-50. Obviously, the main thing that strikes about it is the twin propellers, which is really cool. But the one stuff that I want to focus on is the actual armor and the design of it, because this is designed in a very specific way. It's got two Klimov VK2500 turboshaft engines, so it's got a lot of power behind it. It is heavy, but it's also got a 30mm in the nose, and also it has 4 underwing hardpoints, which can carry either rockets or missiles or bombs, and also missile racks, anti-tank missiles, all of this stuff. So it's able to carry pretty much everything. The idea, at least at the start of it, or at least during the process of it, was that it was going to, replace the Mi-24, but it never got to that point. It was also designed as an air dominance helicopter. So one thing if you talk to a lot of people who are involved in the military, especially in America, one of the things that they'll talk about is it's really odd in War Thunder that you have these helicopters in a sense not in an air dominant zone. So helicopters would only be deployed from an American point of view if you had complete air superiority. The reason for this is because helicopters don't match up too well against aircraft, and also don't match up too well against other systems which are supposed to keep the air clear. So if you have those two things, or if you have either of those things, whether you don't have air dominance, or you have something which is defensive, such as some form of SAM sites, helicopters are not going to get involved in that conflict until those things are dealt with. Now, the Soviets wanted to create something which would be able to maybe deal with those scenarios a little bit better. Maybe if you don't have air dominance, you could still have a helicopter presence. The Ka-50 was supposed to be that, and it just never came to fruition because it's not impossible to do this idea, but it's just highly improbable. An aircraft is always going to outdo a helicopter as long as they, are in similar time periods and so on and so forth. Obviously, the Wright aircraft is not going to, the Wright brothers aircraft is not going to really be able to take on a Ka-50. But you've got to think about it in the terms of this is an 80s to 90s aircraft, which is used today. So think about it in that sense, and you can understand why airplanes are just going to eat it alive. So if you look at it from that point of view, you can understand why the project never really went anywhere, because of the extra cost, and also because of the fact that they already had the Mi-24s and plans to create the Mi-28, which is another passive suggestion which we covered before. So even though this would be lovely to see, because of the ridiculous amount of armaments it has, I mean, look at this, it's crazy, and also the fact that it's quite a bulky helicopter with a lot of stuff going on, especially with the 30mm and all of the different hard points which can carry many different things. You've also got to understand that the reason why it exists is kind of surplus to requirement, which is why they've only built 32 of them and nothing else. So yeah, it would be great to see in game, because I think it would change the helicopter game mode a lot, but its primary use, it wouldn't really fit because it would just get annihilated in ground. That doesn't mean it wouldn't be useful. It still has ATGM, so therefore it's still useful. The last one is for Japan. You don't really hear a lot about Japanese helicopters, apart from the Weebcopter. So this is by Miki Hoshi, and they are talking about the Bell H-13, basically. Or, as you know it, or may not know it, the Kawasaki H-13H. So the Bell H-13 is very much a reconnaissance helicopter, or an aerial reconnaissance helicopter that Bell made. You could also even say it was kind of a transport helicopter, but mainly an observation helicopter. And the Japanese were licensed to produce some H-13s. They called them, they were going to build the H-13H, which was of course an improvement of the H-13. The JGSDF at the time actually used some H-13E E's and G's to do basic training for some of their pilots, and also just to maybe try and get a grasp on helicopters. Because remember, before this, they never really used helicopters at all, because, well, they never really had a use for them. Remember, it's a defensive force, so taking an offensive idea such as ATGMs and putting them on a helicopter didn't really make a lot of sense if you're trying to just create a defensive force. But anyway, so Bell accepted the license and for the H-13, so Kawasaki made the H-13H, and the difference between the Kawasaki H-13H and the Bell H-13 was the fact that the H-13H for Kawasaki had a weaker 200 horsepower Lycoming VO435A1B engine. So, and also the rotor blade was made out of wood, so therefore it was a lot weaker than its counterparts, but also it was one of the first, or if not the first, built helicopters that the Japanese used in any sort of, big way. So the... if you have a look at it, the JG-SDF were not the only people who used the H-13H. Some were converted to H-13Gs, and some were converted for the Brazilian Navy, who operated 2 of them, and then the Burmese Air Force used 12 of these. So yeah, it's kind of interesting how they got shared around. But this was in the 50s, I remember. Going in the late 50s, going into the 60s. But the main contention when it comes to this aircraft, because we all know it exists, right? We all know that it's around. The main contention that a lot of people have had is, did it ever mount, or did it ever have sufficient weaponry to be put into the game? Because we already have helicopters in the game which were observation helicopters but have access to other weaponry. A lot of the French helicopters would be seen as kind of not really search and rescue helicopters, but more designed for that role, or more designed for observation. Well, this would be one of these helicopters too, but the question is, was it ever mounted with other munitions? Now, the idea is that it was mounted with some ATM-1 prototype missiles, some 7.62mm machine guns, and also even a bazooka, and even 70mm rockets. Now, the only picture I've ever seen where it has any armament put in is this one, which is where it has the ATM-1 prototype missiles. Now, if you don't know what these missiles are, the Type 60 in game, which is the the box with the ATGM launchers on top of it, those are the ATM-1 prototype missiles. So they're incredibly slow. They don't pack a big punch. They are the worst ATGMs in game. So if you wanted to put this in as the starter aircraft for Japan, I mean, you could, and you could add the ATGMs on top of it, but my God, I think it would leave a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth on the tree itself, especially since an AH-1S has been added as a premium. People would not like to grind through this. So even though it's a cool idea, and I'm sure it should come to the game, as a starter vehicle, just sounds like a horrific idea. Kind of like how, the Mi-4 that the Soviets have. It's not a fun aircraft to use when you compare it to the Mi-24. So I don't want another experience like that for the Japanese, especially with these ATGMs. It does mean that this helicopter could actually go lower than 8.0, so maybe that's breaking new ground. Should it be in the game? Of course it should be. But the question is, how do you fit it in without leaving people with a bad taste? Because you never want to start a tech tree and the first vehicles are not very good. Circa French rank 1 when it comes to their tanks, or Naval, the Japanese first few machines. They're just not fun to use. So that can leave a bad taste and not let people, research through the tree. So you've got to think about these things. So that's all of the naval and the helicopter stuff. Next time we'll have a look at the miscellaneous things. There's a lot of really cool and interesting stuff when it comes to the interface and UI, so make sure to cover that. And yeah, that's about it for today. some massive ships, and hopefully, well, not really hopefully, but I'm sure at some point we'll go even larger with, instead of heavy cruisers, battle cruisers and battleships. It seems inevitable now. That's going to happen. Whether anybody will play it, I mean, nobody's playing the top stuff anyway now, so, well, we'll have to see. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, John Reinman, Leonard Rudnick, Martinez, Matati, Moxie, Nick Graham, Alobrilo, Super Cacti, Elove Goats, and Seductive Trashcan for supporting the channel.